Start with that penny on income tax story. You can tell there's an election in the air. Labour's the second party in a week to propose an extra penny on income tax. How would you both feel about paying more income tax?
Well, I just...
No.
No.
It's a straight no from Paul.
No.
Paul's like, no.
Eunice?
I think it's one of those things where my automatic reaction is definitely not. I think that if you can appropriately justify what it's going to be spent on, then that could potentially be a justification. I do think that people in general, though, are becoming much more sceptical about tax, and that is because you see a lot of companies, fair enough, that's in reference to corporation tax, but you have companies such as Google, Starbucks, Cafe Nero and so on, who, they work out these ways that they can kind of, I suppose, come across as making a lot less profit than they actually do, by using sort of offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and, so on.
So you think people might say, why should we pay if they
Yes. So I do think it has to be very clearly justified in order for people to feel comfortable about that.
Well, Paul, you heard Kezia Dugdale there say she thought teachers would be happy to pay an extra £4 a week in income tax if it's being invested in education, public services. Do you think teachers, nurses will vote for that?
Maybe if they've got a vested interest in it. Maybe, but most people that won't have a direct interest will think, well, hang on, wait a minute. This isn't actually about whether Labour are going to, people are going to pay more tax. Not. This is about Labour putting clear red water between themselves and the SNP, showing up the SNP for being more right-wing than Labour are. And it's also about Labour not so much position themselves to win more seats. It's about Labour trying to save some seats and trying to attract back some of those voters they lost in the general election to the SNP.
Is it quite a smart move, do you think, though, to actually try and push the SNP into the same corner as the Tories?
Yes. Politically, it's very smart. It is astute to that in that sense. But is it going to attract a whole horde of new voters to carry Labour into a triumphant wave? No, it isn't.
And Eunice, if it's presented as an alternative to austerity, it's very clear where the money's going. Do you think that'll help persuade people?
Well, I think obviously, as I said before, it is imperative that people know exactly what's happening to the money, where it's been spent. I think it's only in that situation that people feel comfortable about that. And I think that's only fair, to be honest.
And of course, Paul, you'll remember a penny for Scotland for the SNP. It didn't work out too well for them.
It didn't work out too well for them. It seemed a very shrewd, clever idea at the time for Scotland to forgo a cut in the UK income tax rate by Gordon Brown at the time. But look at the history of parties that propose tax increases. Neil Kinnock and John Smith in 1992, when a nation waited with bated breath for Labour to form the next government. It didn't happen because the party was planning tax increases.
OK.
It doesn't have a good history.
Well, let's move on to Cameron's EU deal on EU reform. It could pave the way for an in-out referendum in June. Needless to say, though, UKIP's Nigel Farage wasn't that impressed with the deal.
This package was hardly worth the wait. It's pathetic, really. There is no single power that comes back to the United Kingdom. There's no reduction on the bill we pay. There's no possibility of controlling our borders.
Eunice, do you think controlling our borders is actually what's going to swing it for a lot of people?
To be honest, I think a lot of people will already have made up their mind on this topic already. I do think there are those that will be influenced by these coming results of what David Cameron has gone out and what he's achieved or not achieved. But for me personally, I do think it is good to stay in the EU, and I think that's for a number of reasons. I think that whether we think that it's a good thing or a bad thing, I think it's important to be part of that so that we can actually help to encourage a more positive direction and perhaps even lead in a more positive way that is beneficial for Europe and beneficial for countries outside of the European Union.
Paul?
Well, I think if you were against Britain staying in the EU, this isn't going to change your opinion. And if you were for anyway. I think it really, there's no substance from what he's brought back here. It is basically a fig leaf to give those waverers within his own cabinet and in his own party an excuse not to step out of line and back Britain staying in. I think external factors will dictate whether Britain votes to stay in the EU. If it's held in June, the polls say that Britain's likely to vote to stay in. If he leaves it later than that, over the summer, and we get another migration crisis in the scale of what's been happening since last year, that could well be a factor.
OK, well, I don't want to run out of time because I want to talk about happiness. Yes. A new survey out says that 65 to 79-year-olds were judged to be the happiest of all in the UK. It found young people, along with the retired, got most life satisfaction. Do you think that's true, Eunice?
I think that could potentially be true, and that's for a number of reasons. I think when you get to that point in time in your life that you've gone through so many different things, you really just do appreciate life. And I think that's one of the things that I suppose we might be lacking, is just gratitude and appreciation. Because, you know, we do have a lot, and I think, unfortunately, when you live in a society as connected as we do, and you can see, you know, other people might have more than you, then you're focusing on that rather than focusing and being grateful for what you've actually got. And I think that can lead to anxiety and feeling like, you know, you're not doing as well as you actually are doing. Which,
and,
you know,
we're just about to run out of time, but Paul, any tips for contentment?
Don't worry about the things that keep you awake at night, because they'll either sort themselves out or they will never happen.
That sounds like very sound advice. Thanks very much, Paul. Eunice, thanks for coming in.